Hello Year 5 and welcome to your history lesson for the week. We are carrying on with our medicine unit. Last week we looked at the Romans and this week we're going to be looking at medieval medicine. So I'm going to share my screen and let's get on with the lesson. So our LO is to investigate medieval medicine and the events during the Black Plague. Our big question is, did rats cause the Black Plague? They are just checking. I know you guys can't respond to the questions, but if you'd like to have a little write down to see what you can remember, feel free. So last week, what was the Romans word for bad air? That was a fancy word for it. Last unit, what did the cavemen use to sack bones when they'd broken their bones? A picture of an Egyptian tomb is a primary source, yes or no? And what is the name of the fourth planet from the sun? So you can have a little pause of the video and see if you can answer those, writing down your answers on a piece of scrap paper, and then we will go through them together. Okay, so question number 1, what was the Romans' word for bad air? It was my asthma. What did the cavemen use to set bones? They used clay. Is a picture of an Egyptian tomb a primary source? No, a picture of something is a secondary source, and the fourth planet from the sun is Mars. So you can give yourself some ticks for just checking, and that was just a kind of warm up. Okay, so our big question is, did rats cause the Black Plague? And let's investigate. So let's review what we've learned so far. So prehistoric times, the first week we learned about, we knew that there were witch doctors or shamans. They used dances and chants to treat sickness. They treated headaches and epilepsy by cutting a hole in the skull called trepanning. For the ancient Egyptians, we learned that a strong pulse meant being healthy. They began to record their ideas. They also used chants. They created the channel theory about the Nile and the tubes that run through our body. And the doctors were called Sunu. And for the Greeks and Romans, we know that Hippocrates is thought as the father of modern medicine. Galen dissected animals to learn about anatomy. There were the 4 humours, and the Romans cared a lot about public health. So this week we're going to be looking at the medieval period. So we've looked at the Romans, and now from 500 AD, around that kind of time, to 1500 AD. The Roman army left Britain in 410 AD, after it was decided their soldiers were needed elsewhere in the empire. The period after they left is the medieval period, sometimes known as the Dark Ages. The medieval period lasted until 1458. After the Romans left in 410 AD, the native Britons destroyed and rejected anything the Romans had left behind. Buildings and towns were left to fall apart, and many Greek and Roman ideas about medicine and technology were lost. So here are some facts about the medieval times. Communication was slow during the medieval times. Learning and technology was held onto in the Christian monasteries, but apart from the monks and the rich, many people were illiterate. Some native Britons didn't like the Romans, and so didn't trust anything to do with them. The church encouraged prayer and superstition. They forbade the study of the human body, and so new treatments were rare. Many Britons preferred to live in rural areas where they could farm easily rather than in cities and towns as the Romans did. So here's some vocabulary for us to learn. Bubonic plague was a disease. Monasteries are holy places. Illiterate is when you cannot read or write, and superstitions are believing in charms and signs. So in the late medieval period, the living conditions declined in towns and cities. People would empty their chamber pots into the streets with no sewers to flush away any waste. Animals were allowed to roam freely in the streets, and many people relied on the polluted rivers for drinking water. A chamber pot was a pot kept under the bed and was used as a toilet during the night. And then they threw them out onto the street. So what do you think disease and medicine were like at this point in time? Miasma, or bad air, was still widely believed to be the cause of many illnesses and diseases. Doctors were poorly trained and expensive. Many still followed the teachings of Galen, the ancient Greek physician, as it was still forbidden by religious law to study a human body, there was little study into other theories. So because they couldn't open wounds or look inside the body, study the human body, they could only go off what was from the past, and they weren't able to make many new discoveries. Quite often, a doctor might use a patient's star sign or the moon's phases to decide on a treatment. The Black Death or the plague. So a plague came along during the medieval times, and it was caused by the Oriental rat flea. This flea would be carried on a black rat from abroad and had a disease in it. So we now know the most common form of the Black Death was the Bubonic Plague. This disease was spread by fleas which lived on the black rat. The fleas sucked the rat's blood, which contained the plague germs. When the rat died, the fleas jumped onto humans and passed on the deadly disease. What were the symptoms of the plague? So day one, you get painful swellings called buboes, and they appeared in the victim's armpits and groin. These were usually about the size of an egg and could sometimes be as big as an apple. The victim vomited and developed a fever. Bleeding under the skin caused dark blotches all over the body. The disease attacked the nervous system. This caused the victim to suffer spasms. The victim was in terrible pain. Day 5, sometimes the buboes burst and foul-smelling black liquid oozed from the open boils. When this happened, the victim usually lived. However, in most cases, the victim suffered a painful death. So, are there any cures? Medieval people did not know about germs causing disease. They did not understand that the plague was spread by rats and fleas. They thought that people's bodies were poisoned. If the swellings burst and the poison came out, people sometimes survived. It seemed sensible to draw out the poison. So, their cure number 1, the swelling should be softened with figs and cooked onions. The onions should be mixed with yeast and butter, then open the swellings with a knife. Cure number 2 was to take a live frog and put its belly on the plague sore. The frog will swell up and burst. Keep doing this with further frogs until they stop bursting. Some people say that dried toad will do the job better. How useful do you think these medieval cures actually were? Do you think they were helpful, or do you think they were more harmful? Have a little think. Okay, so the Black Plague had devastated the population of Britain. A third of the population had been killed in the first 2 years, meaning there were fewer fit and healthy people to work and farm. Many religious establishments were badly affected. Many of the monks who cared for the sick and the priests who led the churches died from the plague. During the medieval period, monasteries, so the holy places, like churches, became places to care for the sick. Monks and nuns who lived there would care for people who had become ill. They called them hospitals because they provided hospitality such as food, shelter, clothing. They were far from the hospitals we know today and were not thought of as places of healing. So for your task, what I'd like you to do is go on to the Teams assignment, and I want you to create me a poster about the symptoms, the cures, and what people would have done if you had bubonic plague. So you're going to give me lots of information about the plague, what did the doctors do, how helpful was it. You can do this either digitally on the Word document, or you can attach a picture if you'd like to draw it yourself. If you've missed anything from the PowerPoint, or you want to just pause for information, feel free to come back to this video and to watch again, or to pause and write down any key information. So I want a lovely poster with colours and pictures to tell me about the Black Death. It could be a leaflet or a warning about getting the Black Death, what to do, and cures, remembering to put whether you think that they were actually helpful or not. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I can't wait to see all of your wonderful posters. See you all soon.